So this is a critical issue for us on a moving forward basis.
Despite financial concerns, the bill for Anishinaabek control of education moves ahead to the Senate.
To strengthen the role, the leadership of women, of Aboriginal women, is going to be really key.
The Status of Women Committee looks deeper into why more inmates are Indigenous women.
That's the sad part of winning this award, is that what I'm winning it for.
And Lorelei Williams is honored for her advocacy for missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Juanita Tautungi.
And I'm Dennis Ward. A historic bill known as Bill C-61, the Anishinaabek Education Act, is making its way through the Senate before it becomes law.
Today, the Standing Senate Committee on Aboriginal Peoples heard from First Nation leadership about the bill. Here's Annette Francis.
We're happy to have representatives from the First Nations involved in this historic event.
Anishinaabek Nation Deputy Grand Chief Glenn Hare began the introduction. He said it took 20 years to get to this stage. It's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Myself, literally, and with my team, but myself, from 2006 to sitting here today, I've literally driven 1.3 million kilometers, visiting face-to-face our communities.
Hare represents 40 First Nations in Ontario. 23 of them are moving forward with the education agreement. According to Kelly Crawford, the director of the Anishinaabek education system, the passage of this bill would mean full control over education from junior kindergarten to grade 12 and control over post-secondary funding, making a difference in the lives of almost 14,000 students.
We have an opportunity here to use education as a tool to rebuild and strengthen our nation, our language, our culture, and our traditions. We will use the education funding provided by Canada to support the delivery of culturally appropriate programs and services, increase student attendance rates, increase our graduation rates, and ensure the preservation and promotion of our Anishinaabe culture and language.
Then came the round of questions. Conservative Senator Dennis Patterson expressed concerns that there were no capital dollars included with the agreement.
Would you say that the capital issue, renovations and replacement, is one of the key issues that you might have wished had been included in this historic agreement?
Tracy O'Donnell, a negotiator for the Anishinaabek Education Agreement, says it is an issue.
We don't have the same amount of monies to invest in ensuring that all the schools have the broadband technology to run computer labs or the science labs, or even in some instances too, it's just the very nature of the building itself. They're in need of replacement. And so this is a critical issue for us on a moving forward basis.
Despite concerns over capital funding, the committee approved Bill C-61. It will now head to the Senate chamber for the third reading. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Lois Frank is a professor of Native American Studies at the University of Lethbridge. Today, she testified before the Status of Women Committee. They're looking at the issue of why nearly 2 out of every 5 female prisoners is Indigenous. Frank says there is no easy solution, but doesn't believe duplicating colonial institutions on reserve is the answer.
Having more addiction facilities, courthouses, jails, things like that in the communities, but I think it's a much deeper problem that needs to be addressed. We had those systems in place, you know, in the past. We had our own justice systems, we had people who dispensed punishment, justice, and women were very important in that. To strengthen the role, the leadership of women, of Aboriginal women, is going to be really key in changing all these things.
Parents expect the materials used in their children's classes to be current and accurate, but one mother in Toronto had to take a second look at her son's homework. A worksheet was handed out to a grade 9 history class in Toronto last week. The material, printed in 1999, was about Canada's history of immigration. Amy Desjardins was upset when she read what her son brought home, claiming the theory that Indigenous people traveled to North America over the Bering Strait.
20 years is a long time in our communities, and we've gone so far. We have a lot of teachers that are educated, that are doing the work on the ground, so there's no reason that there should be outdated theories like this being used, that appropriate resources aren't being included right now. So I think there's a lot more bridge building and outreach and knowledge sharing that needs to be done.
In a statement, Toronto's District School Board said staff from their Aboriginal Education Centre will be visiting students to ensure they have accurate information, and updated resources have already been provided to the school.
Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould continued to field questions about why an Indigenous person wasn't named to the Supreme Court of Canada. Sheila Martin is set to replace the retiring Beverly McLaughlin on Canada's highest bench. There was a lot of speculation it was going to be an Indigenous person, but that will have to wait at least 4 more years.
There is mandatory retirements coming. Justice Abella, mandatory retirement is in 2021. There's an opportunity there. We don't know what's going to happen with our amazing justices that sit on the bench right now, but we are prepared under the process that our Prime Minister has led to ensure that any appointment under our government will be someone that is functionally bilingual, is beyond reproach in terms of their merit, and reflects the diversity of the country.
After 40 years since first being proposed, British Columbia's Site C Dam project has been given approval by the NDP government. As APTN's Tina House reports, the decision to continue building the dam is a controversial one.
The controversial Site C Dam project was approved by the former Liberal government, and construction began in July of 2015. Last July, the NDP defeated the Clark government. One of its mandates was to send the Site C Dam to the BC Utilities Commission for review, and they delivered on that promise. However, this project is past the point of no return, said BC Premier John Horgan at a news conference in Victoria.
They gave us, sadly, just one clear choice. That was to proceed with a $10.7 billion project, or cancel that project and absorb $4 billion in construction and remediation costs.
The announcement came as a shock and disappointment to many, including Grand Chief Stuart Phillip of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs.
It's an absolute betrayal of their commitments that they campaigned on, the promises they made, the visits to Treaty 8. We have pictures of John Horgan holding up signs, Site C sucks. On the river. He met with the Treaty 8 people and gave them assurances that his government would, in all likelihood, bring the project to a close.
We agree that decisions like this must be done in tandem and in concert with Indigenous peoples, but those challenges have passed. The previous government made decisions to proceed, leaving some of those questions unanswered.
The BC government said it wasn't prepared to absorb a $2 billion loss to stop the project, and were left with no choice but to proceed. Joe Foy of the Wilderness Committee says he totally disagrees with that decision.
What I heard yesterday was to save money, we shouldn't stop spending money, we should keep spending money to the tune of $10 or $12 billion for electricity we don't need and can only sell at a loss. It boggles the mind.
Criticism is growing from the NDP's decision to give the go-ahead to the Site C Dam project. From the land to the courts, the First Nations here in BC say they will vow to continue to fight against the project. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Mi'kmaq lawyer and advocate Pam Palmater is our guest on tonight's Encore edition of Face to Face. We spoke with Palmater about the Trudeau government, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. We asked Palmer whether the national inquiry would satisfy the families who fought so hard to make it happen.
It might for some families, but there's a large number of families who are not closely tied politically to anyone. They're not getting information. They're not being engaged with. And then think of all of the women and girls who are not going to be able to participate. They haven't reached out to women in prisons and youth corrections. What about all of the homeless women and the women who live in shelters? There's simply no plan to get to the majority of people that should be testifying.
You can catch the full episode of Face to Face with Pam Palmer right after the news. You can also find it in all of our episodes of Face to Face at aptnnews.ca. Time for a quick break, and then we'll introduce you to an advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, recently recognized for her work.
And we'll also introduce you to another young woman from the Yukon recognized for her work in preventing lateral violence in Indigenous communities. Here's a look at Wednesday's weather forecast. Beginning in the East Coast, rain and 9 degrees in Charlottetown and Halifax. In Inukjuak, snow and -18. Sunny in Kuujjuaq and -15. -9 in Montreal tomorrow. Gaspé, cloudy and a high of 6. Sunny and -17 in North Bay. Sarnia, a mix of sun and cloud and -6. Clear and -20 on the way for Timmins. Clear and -17 for Sudbury. A mix of sun and cloud in the Paw, with a daytime high of -2, -13 and cloudy in Thompson. A mix of sun and cloud in Dauphin and Brandon, reaching a high of -1, -5 in Winnipeg. 0 in Yorkton tomorrow and 2 degrees in Estevan, 1 degree in Saskatoon, -7 in Uranium City and -8 in Stony Rapids.
Welcome back. An advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women was honored in Toronto on Thursday night. Lorelei Williams received an award for her work empowering Indigenous women. Beverly Andrews has the story.
Happy birthday to my cousin Tanya Holick. You know, she's one of the reasons why I do the work I do about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
The Everyday Political Citizen Award honors people who contribute to their communities in a variety of areas. Lorelei Williams from Vancouver won the over 30 category.
Our women and girls are going missing and being murdered at a high rate. And that's the sad part of winning this award, is that what I'm winning it for. You know, like, I shouldn't have to be doing this. You know, this shouldn't be an issue here or anywhere in the world.
Samara Canada and a panel of jurors select the winners from hundreds of nominations from across Canada. Jane Hilderman, Executive Director, says it's a tough job choosing a winner from all the fantastic candidates.
Whether they be educators, mobilizers, activists, champions of different causes, they all enrich our democracy with that commitment, that time, that talent, and we wanted to celebrate those people because they often don't get the recognition that they deserve.
Williams started raising awareness when her aunt, Belinda Williams, went missing from Vancouver's downtown east side in 1978. Then her cousin, Tanya Holick, went missing in 1996 and was later found to be a victim of Robert Pickton. The police didn't take either disappearance seriously when they were reported.
Everybody needs to know about it because it has to end. Like, I don't see it ending anytime soon.
She says it's important to have a support system to help you along a journey like this because the work is emotionally draining.
I take advantage of ceremonies, cultural ceremonies, self-care, because it's hard work. It's really hard, and you have to have a community around you, and this is how I'm here today. It's because of my community.
This single mom continues her work through her dance company, Butterflies in Spirit, her position at the Vancouver Aboriginal Community Policing Centre, while volunteering with the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Coalition and attending school. Beverly Andrews, APTN National News, Toronto.
And another young Indigenous woman took home a Samara Canada Award in the under 30 category for her work in preventing lateral violence in Indigenous communities. Shirley McLean has more.
Last week, Tegan Valavan was awarded the Everyday Political Citizen Award for her work as co-founder of Youth for Lateral Kindness, a small business that delivers workshops to Indigenous communities on lateral violence.
It just feels really good, and we're feeling the love, we're feeling the overwhelming support from our community, wanting to see us succeed with Youth for Lateral Kindness. And it's just a really nice feeling to be recognized on a national level.
And when they go forward, they go with that.
In 2016, Valavan, along with other Yukon youth, were learning how to facilitate workshops on lateral violence to other Indigenous youth. After the project ended, Valavan used that knowledge to co-found her own business, Youth for Lateral Kindness.
Myself and my business partner, Aurora Hardy, we realized how important this work was and how meaningful it really felt, and just how needed it was in the communities.
Lateral violence thrives whenever a group turns on itself to act out rage, anger, and frustration, usually through backstabbing, bullying, gossiping, family feuds, blaming, and shaming that often occurs in Indigenous communities.
Because lateral violence is a learned behavior, so we're trying to teach other youth how to unlearn it and just kind of give them tools for when they're faced with those situations, and then just kind of getting them thinking about changing their behavior in the moment, you know?
Valavan says receiving the award was a pleasant surprise and hopes the recognition will open doors to teach lateral kindness for the betterment of Indigenous communities. Shirley McLean, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Congrats to both on the recognition. Time for another quick break, and when we return, we'll tell you about a new trend in TV hailed as the Ojibwe Netflix.
And we'll also tell you what an Indigenous student at the University of Regina gave them for their efforts towards reconciliation. Stay with us. Here's the rest of tomorrow's weather forecast. High level will be sunny, reaching a high of -3. Sunny in Grand Prairie and 2 degrees. Sunny in Edmonton as well, reaching a high of 4 degrees. Cloudy and 5 in Calgary. In Victoria tomorrow, cloudy skies and 8 degrees. Campbell River, cloudy and 7. Dease Lake will be cloudy as well and -3. Sunny in Fort Nelson and -1. Dawson City will reach -8 under cloudy skies. Snow in Mayo and -9. Sunny and -1 in Fort Liard and Somba Cay, formerly Trout Lake, -13 in Norman Wells, -12 and sunny in Inuvik, -16 in Fort McPherson, sunny and -26 tomorrow in Cambridge Bay, -28 in Baker Lake, and in Resolute Bay tomorrow, -21, -19 in Igloolik, -17 in Pangnaktok, and -14 in Iqaluit.
Welcome back. There are more than 70 Indigenous languages being spoken across Canada today, yet there are few television shows being broadcast in a traditional tongue. But as Brittany Hobson shows us, one Winnipeg-based tech company is looking to change that.
So we're live now.
With the click of a button, North America's first Aboriginal language streaming service is ready for the world to see. It's called Ojibwe TV, and it's being hailed as the Ojibwe Netflix. Winnipeg-based Ogaki Learning Inc. is behind the new service. They specialize in language learning apps and wanted to create an extension of that.
With young kids nowadays, we live in the YouTube generation, so we wanted to see, how could we reach them with the video that we're producing or the cartoons that we're animating for our other apps.
The concept started 2 months ago after the team noticed educators were the ones primarily using their language apps. They brainstormed ways of bringing the same content into a more traditional setting.
Why not build out an app that a teacher can use in the classroom to watch a video, to listen to an audio streaming, to watch a cartoon, and then maybe have a test after it?
Right now, there are about 50 different videos available through the service, including an in-house produced cartoon called Frankie and Friends.
For
the voice of Frankie, they brought on local Ojibwe speaker Frank Bolio. He also helped create story ideas for each episode.
There's going to be more scenes in the classroom, outside playing. There are also going to be animations where Frankie learns how to hunt with grandfather and how to bake bannock with grandmother.
While the service is only streaming Ojibwe content, Baxter hopes it opens the door for other Aboriginal language streaming services.
It shows the capacity of watching programs in young people's own language, and it opens up the doors for a larger conversation. You know, how are we going to start to deliver language content to a greater public?
Ojibwe TV is available through Apple TV and Android Box. A version for iTunes will be available for download in the new year. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
It is one of the highest honors one can receive from the Indigenous community, the presentation of an Eagle staff, thanks to their efforts towards reconciliation. The University of Regina was presented the prestigious gift by a current Indigenous student. Anishinaabek has the details.
After a year of planning, Elder Roy Bison and his son Teddy Bison present this Eagle staff to the University of Regina. This day came to Teddy through a vision he had 4 years ago.
I wanted to make it happen where there would be an Eagle staff, you know, that was displayed. And so I approached the Aboriginal Student Center, and they said they would help me with it.
This staff is one of the staff that was brought up through our Tayushbaye, our societies and clan.
The university received this honor for its work towards reconciliation and indigenization by including Indigenous content into the curriculum, establishing the Aboriginal Student Center, and creating the Office of Indigenization.
It's very much a historical moment for the University of Regina. One, we are now permanently displaying the Treaty 4 flags, and also to be gifted an Eagle staff is one of the most significant things that can happen.
Streets and buildings on campus now include Indigenous names, and an Indigenous advisory circle provides guidance for the university. Indigenous enrollment has also climbed 91% since 2010, and 13% of the university's student population now identifies as Indigenous.
And our university should reflect that. So I'm very proud of the 13%, which is the number of Indigenous students, but I want it to be even more.
Roy attended university here in 1980 in the SUNTEP program, and now his children are enrolled here, including his son. He sees the staff as an important symbol to balance ceremony and education.
We always say, carry that education and that chanupa or a spalgin or a yoke, that pipe, these ways, use them both.
You know, all those feathers, the beads, the designs, even that curved, everything has a meaning on it.
The Eagle staff will be a permanent fixture of the University of Regina, and it will be at ceremonies and events here. It will also be on display here at the Office of Indigenization. Anishinaabek, CTV News, Regina.
That is your APTN National News for tonight. Stick around for Face to Face with Pam Palmater. I'm Dennis Ward.
And I'm Juanita Tautunin. Have a great evening. Do join us tomorrow on In Focus for a musical special. Don Amaro will come into the studio and help us get into the holiday spirit. See you tomorrow.